Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hey everybody, this is the Digital Asset Investor, and let me tell you what, I've now been doing this since May of 2018. I have been talking to you more or less, I've been talking to you about crypto in general, but the focus has always been on Ripple and XRP. I'm 48 years old, I have a finance degree, I have an MBA, I was a financial advisor at Morgan Stanley for a while. I have seen company after company after company. I went through the dot-com boom and I've had all sorts of life experience, the financial crisis. And let me tell you what I've never heard around any company, about any company. I have never, ever heard some of the things said that I have heard said by, not about Ripple, but things that I have heard said by people at Ripple. And these aren't just people. These are executives. These are people that are from everybody from, it could be the CEO or it could be, but anyway, these are people that have gone to school at Harvard and Columbia and Yale, and these are people who have worked at Goldman Sachs and places like that, Yahoo, you name it, okay? And I have heard them say things, not one time, but many, many, many times. And that's what's kept me so fixated on this one company and this one digital asset for all of this time. I decided I would make you a video that focuses on just some of those things that I've heard, okay? And that's what this video is. You will enjoy it. Many of you have probably seen all these things, but a lot of you have not. And I'm going to show you what I have discovered. This is my journey of making 2 to 3 videos for over 4 years on this one digital asset, this one company. And these are some of the things I've seen, and I want to make sure that you all see them too. So there's no better sponsor of mine than Link2 for me to show you before I go into it, because they sell Ripple equity. And this is the video for you if you're interested in that. Here's the first one. Miguel Valles used to run, I can't remember his exact title, but he ran XRP Markets, okay? His background, he was at the CME group, and I think he's an Ivy Leaguer. It seems like he was New York University, I can't remember. But I think he went to another one too. I don't remember the different schools he went to. But he said this, and I remember seeing it and saying, simple goal? He says, this is from a Ripple Insights back in 2017. Most importantly, we remain more committed than ever to the simple goal of making XRP the world's reserve digital currency. And I remember reading that the first time and saying, the simple goal? This is a guy with a company. Who says that? That's what I thought to myself. So he also said this. This was in a Twitter thread. And I also to this said, who says that? When XRP, he's replying to someone, when XRP is more liquid than a G10 currency, I'll buy myself a chocolate chip cookie and get back to work. XRP, the standard, and he's most famous for saying #0doubt, okay? And he's also said that he wouldn't own any other digital asset than XRP, okay? And I'm showing a lot of this to you that just so that you understand, none of this is our imagination. We're at a once in 100, 200 year moment here, and a lot of people truly don't comprehend it. Here's Miguel Valles back, I don't remember when this was, doesn't matter, listen to what he says. And ask yourself, when you hear the word lender of last resort, the only people that talk about being a lender of last resort are like central banks or the IMF. Listen to this.
How do you intend to distribute the rest of the XRP then?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, Mahir. And I don't necessarily know that we'll ever distribute all of it. In my mind's eye, there's a possibility where, we end up more of a lending kind of, more of a lender of last resort capacity maybe. I think that would be a little strange for a software company, and maybe some things would have to change structurally. Maybe we have to have a different organization or something. Who knows, right? But as these capital markets develop, as liquidity develops, there are going to be folks who, if they want to provide liquidity in the asset, don't want to necessarily own the asset because that puts them in harm's way for price movements. So if you can borrow the asset and create liquidity that way, it's actually a much more efficient way to be part of the liquidity mechanism. It's how traditional capital markets work. I mean, my first job on a trading desk was managing the repo book, the overnight Tom Next kind of liquidity provision that every day we had to roll. There's nothing like that in digital assets. So partly because the transfers happen instantaneously, but also partly because it just hasn't developed. And one of my longer term goals, after I get the ecosystem built out, after I get payments running through there, as I start to merge or try to merge the two worlds, the digital asset markets and the traditional capital markets, as I try to do that, I think one of the levers that we'll be able to pull will be lending. And as a result, I don't necessarily know that we'll need some XRP, right, in order to do that. So I guess a long-winded way of saying, I'm not sure we'll ever get rid of all of it and sort of let it all out into the wild, partly because there is some utility for us or maybe some other, organization having it to make sure that the markets are always liquid.
Okay, that's one of the things. Then we had this with Chris Larson. This one always stuck at me. I've always wondered what forest they were in, by the way, but this always stuck out.
What about the future of cryptocurrencies? Where do you see the future of these digital assets and maybe the role of Bitcoin and Ripple or XRP in that future?
Yeah, so our view is that these digital assets really become supplemental to the existing family of currencies, right? So every country still needs its own, fiat currency for all kinds of reasons. I won't get into it. It's very complicated, right? And I actually think that the big four, the yen, the euro, the dollar, the RMB, they actually, I think, come stronger in this world that we're going into, partially because of digital assets.
Okay.
That these digital assets actually contribute to a world that's more interoperable, where more people around the globe can get access to these big four. And most of global commerce is done in the big four. So I think you have a bifurcation going on. Those big four get stronger. I think some of the smaller currencies, maybe even more of the very small fiat currencies become less relevant, maybe even disappear. A country could have its own fiat, but still use one of the big four. You have lots of
like
examples.
Montenegro, right?
Absolutely. But I think then where the digital assets fit in, like things like XRP and Bitcoin and Ethereum, they're kind of in that mid-range. They become, I think, like the Singapore dollar or the Swiss franc, and they become useful in, kind of lubricating the world to make it easier for those big four to get in the hands of people all around the world. So that's useful. And then it might also be things like applications and devices that maybe primarily use one of those digital assets. So that's kind of the view we have. So I think in that world, countries should be less threatened by what's going on and see them as simply supplemental rather than a threat. Too much talk.
Okay, now we've got this. This is Brad Garlinghouse. I think he was in like South Korea or something when he said this was, and I don't remember the year that this was. Just listen.
Well, so when XRP was created, this actually was created before Ripple existed. The creators of XRP decided there'd be 100 billion units because they saw it as rather than having a smaller number with a very high price, they saw it as something they wanted to be effectively a global reserve currency.
Let me tell you what. There's only one other company that I have heard one of their people that used to be with that company say that their idea was to create a global reserve currency. Only one. And it was a former member, it was that Luke Nosak guy who was with PayPal. And he said that when they originally started PayPal, that was their goal, but they got distracted because they had investors that they had to keep happy, and that becoming a global reserve currency became too much of a thing, became too hard to do because they couldn't serve their investors what they wanted at the same time work on that bigger project. All right, then there's this. Now this right here, to give you some context, I was standing in the room when this happened. And what you cannot hear in this video, the important thing you need to know first is that this was at Ripple Swell 2019 in Singapore. This is Dr. Raghuram Rishan. He was the chief economist at the IMF, 23rd governor of the Reserve Bank of India, okay? There's two things that you need to get out of it, or three things. First thing is that Brad Combs of Digital Perspectives is the guy answering asking the question, and it took some real guts to do it. Second thing you need to get out of this is that nobody laughed. Nobody laughed. That question, it was not laughed off stage. In fact, the thing you can't hear, but I was sitting in the room because I know when Brad Combs asked this question, there was like this low, like applause that was going on. Everybody, it was like one of those moments where everybody in the room wanted him to ask that question, which means that everybody in the room had that thought, the same thought that Brad Combs had, and was like cheering him on for asking the question. Listen to this.
Who has the mic? Please go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Bradley Kimes from Investment Perspectives and Cryptonaires documentary. I wanted to ask a question about globalization. If you could talk about the idea of the old concept of the banker coin and a neutral asset being in place of a global reserve status of the dollar, and possibly that being XRP.
What you're asking for is whether there's a possibility of a global currency. And to some extent, that's what Libra was trying to do. And as I understand it, that's different from what XRP is trying to do. And the reason is as follows. As soon as you go to maintaining the value, right, some kind of stable coin, a whole set of regulatory concerns get triggered. I have to make sure that there is corresponding financial or real assets backing this notional value that they seek to maintain. That looks a lot more like a bank, right? Because you're promising some claims which are fixed, and that requires regulation for reasons I just talked about. Now, once you get an army of regulators, every central bank looking at it, then the question is, have you added a whole set of transaction costs to this, and is it worth, is it that useful? As I understand it, what is attempted with XRP is not so much...
All right, then there's a little part two right here.
It's not so much maintaining the value, but offering a vehicle for exchange, which is quite different, because there you can have value fluctuating. All you need is value to be stable for 10 seconds while the whole transaction takes place. And as a result, there's a whole different need for regulation. You don't need to regulate value. I don't care. So long as there is some value, the transaction can certainly take place. And as a regulator, I'm not so worried about either this displacing my fiat currency, because you're moving from one fiat currency to another. It's just an interim value. And it's a means of exchange, but it's neither a store of value nor a unit account, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you very much.
All right. That was a surreal moment when I saw that. And so is this. This is Brad Growinghouse with Ross Leckow, who was the general counsel of the IMF at the time.
And not even specific to Ripple or to XRP's community. I think one of the things that will surprise us a year from now is that banks will be custodying digital assets directly. And I think right now we think about that and think, look, there's no way that's going to happen. They're too conservative. And I think what you're seeing is, two things happening. One is banks are seeing that a lot of money is being made by digital asset exchanges globally, and banks are profit motivated. The second, and as we've talked about up here, certainly Ross has made very clear, is regulatory clarity and regulatory frameworks enable banks and financial institutions to lean into these markets. And I think we will surprise ourselves by this time. And by the way, I'll also predict that it will be banks in the ASEAN markets where there is this regulatory clarity and there is a lot of progressive forward thinking. They'll be the first to actually allow for crypto assets custody in their accounts. All right, with that, we'll turn it over to questions, and I see a bunch of questions on this screen, which I can't really read from here, but we're supposed to pick some. Can you see those? Oh, there's 2 votes.
Let me try.
Do you see IMF holding crypto assets in the future? Oh, they're over here. That's easier. You want to take one? Go for it. The first one's for you. IMF. Do you see IMF holding crypto assets in the future? I did not put that up there.
Remember, I'm from the legal department. I'm supposed to be very conservative about these things. I don't want to go into great details about
Maybe I should take what the IMF is going to do. I think we stunned Ross into silence with that one.
For that to happen, okay, under the current legal framework, some country would have to use a crypto asset as its currency.
Okay, now this video is a little longer than normal, but that's okay. I'm going to get through this. Then this was another moment when Brad Garlinghouse was at the IMF. That's the same guy, Ross Leckow. That's Christine Lagarde. This is I can't remember her name. I think that's somebody from Ripple. I can't remember. But anyway, at the IMF, I thought that was surreal too. That's the picture of him on stage with him. And then we have this moment. This is when Brad Garlinghouse pops up at this conference in Switzerland, the Swiss SNB. Anyway, everybody was there. You had the director of monetary markets, IMF. That's the manager of the BIS right there. That's Christine Lagarde. This is Saudi Arabian Monetary Authority, Hong Kong Monetary Authority. You know, it all, and this person listed everybody. Look at this. Director IMF, this person's governor, South African Reserve Bank, Israel Bank governor, governor Central Bank Thailand, President Federal Reserve Bank of New York, governor Saudi Arabia Bank, governor Austrian Bank Central Bank, governor Central Bank Greece, Hong Kong Chief Executive Monetary Authority, Central Bank governor of Norway, Russia Central Bank, manager of the BIS, board president of Swiss National Bank, vice president board of Swiss National Bank, Peru Central Bank president, teacher economics, University of Berkeley, California, You see what the point is? Who does that? How do you get in a room like that? How does that happen? These things don't happen. Then, of course, he's got this wrong. That's not his name. It's Naveen Gupta is his name. This guy is with, I think he's still with Ripple. I can't remember.
Ordinary company. We are not here to have a small market share or do X, do Y, and make small amount of money or something to happen. We are here to make a dent in the universe. Either we will change the remittance universe, the way you understand, the way value gets transferred across the world, between people, between institutions, or we will just fade away. So it's almost 0 or 1. And some of it comes from our Silicon Valley arrogance. Some of it comes from,
So they'll either put a dent in the universe or they'll go away. Then there's this, of course, and that would be all the money.
You say this before, but I'll throw it out to the audience. What is Interledger's total addressable market size? All the money. Nobody wanted to feed it. Yeah, it's all the money, because what we're really talking about with this idea of the Internet of Value is creating a single global payment network that connects literally everyone and processes maybe not 100%, but 90+% of all the money.
90+% of all the money. Then we had Chris Larson on Money 2020. I can't remember the year of, here it is, 2018. You know,
10 years
a very good point is made up here. It's the only clip I've seen. He was at Money 2020 being interviewed, and I have never seen anything except just this clip from that interview.
10 years out on the financial crisis, we still don't have the infrastructure perhaps to prevent the next one. And I think this is where digital assets can really help, because an efficient digital asset can really solve some of the key problems in global liquidity. You know, the world's got trillions and trillions of dollars tied up in liquidity just to get around how clunky the movement of value is around the world. If with a really efficient digital asset, something like XRP, again, that's what we believe will be the most efficient, you can now reduce trillions and trillions of capital from being tied up. So you can make those transfers instantly as a bank or as a payment provider or as an enterprise without having to have money pre-positioned all over the world. So that.
And then there's this one. Let's get to this part. This is Brianna Madigan, who ran, I think she ran XRP Markets. She's ex-Goldman Sachs, by the way.
Why is liquidity important for market stability and health then?
I think even to take a step back,
And by the way, I saw her when I was in Austin at Consensus when Brad Garlinghouse was speaking. She walked by me and looked like she saw a ghost. And I did not make it awkward for her and say anything to her.
It has a lot of components that are important to kind of address. So one of which is immediacy. So I think about that as how quickly can I get access to markets and how quickly can I trade into and out of this asset or token for another asset. I think about the breadth of the market. So breadth is sort of how you think about the trading volumes at different prices in the order book. And then depth of the market. And depth of the market is really about how many orders there are close to exactly where the price is currently trading of varying sizes, which would imply that you could get a lot of volume through without having much price movement as you're trading into and out of the asset. And then in addition, accessibility is very important. So accessibility is just probably as it intuitively sounds, the ability to access markets to trade in those assets very easily. And that can be geographically or through multiple infrastructure partners, whether it's exchanges or OTC desks or what have you. And the last key attribute of a healthy liquid market is really resilience. And that is getting at the ability for a market to recover from a significant systemic event. So if there was some sort of a market shock, the ability for order books to get back to normality and tighten back to similar prices to where they were prior to that event relatively quickly.
Now, what's interesting about that clip I just played you is that's from one of the Ripple drops. And when they put that Ripple drop out, they took out that part you just heard where she said the systemic event. They took it out, but of course, out here in social media, once we have it, we have it. And so it's out there forever. I'm going to finish with this. Bob Way, who recently made a reappearance in social media, he said this. He was one of the first 10 employees at Ripple. Before I read this, I want to tell you what Greg Kidd said when I interviewed him, and he was one of the first too. He said when he sat down at a card table and he heard about Ripple, he said it, and what they were doing, he said it was like Moses coming down, okay? And this is what Bob Way said. Several people left fancy jobs and joined Ripple because, I paraphrase, if we capture even a minor fraction of the international payments market, do you know the value XRP will need to have to support that? Do the math. Really, really big trade number divided by 100 billion XRP equals wow. Those sort of conversations always buoyed my spirits and made me smile. But really, they also gave me anxiety and made me remember that my job was to make sure we don't all F this up. I'm the digital asset investor. I'm not an investment advisor. This is for entertainment purposes only. Please subscribe, hit the like button, and tell your friends and family that this video tells you why I have been so fixated for over 4 years on this one company and this one digital asset.